Alright everyone, it's time for episode 150 of Vermont Issues. This will be the last time that I do this like on a daily basis, but some people want me to move it to like maybe weekly or just more sporadic. I'll do that, but the playlist will no longer be on the main page. I'm gonna put a gaming playlist there because it's gonna go well beyond Fallout. It's gonna be like Fallout, Minecraft, Vicky 2, some online games, some other stuff. So it's gonna be expansive and it's more popular in general. It seems, than the Vermont playlist. So I'm going to bump that off the main page and make it more, periodic. But it's time to talk about some of the most fun things that you can do in the state of Vermont. Some restaurants that I like that I've gone to, some, location, museums and sites and so forth. I would say a lot of it's up in the Burlington area. They've got the biggest library, which is UVM's library. I think there's also a city library too. So if you like books and stuff like that, sort of museums and things, they've got the Echo Center up there, which is a spectacular. The Echo Center is mostly geared towards the younger crowd. But it's still interesting. Even if you're an adult, there are fun things to do. It's aquatic. It's related to Lake Champlain for the most part. It's an interesting scientific center. They've actually got like chunks of shipwreck there that they've got on display and things. Pay a little bit of everything. It's not just fish and here you can touch the crayfish sort of stuff. It goes a little bit beyond that. It's quite large as well. It's not exactly the Boston Aquarium, but it's by Vermont standards, it's pretty in-depth. So that's some stuff in Burlington, and of course, Burlington's also got Church Street. Church Street is like the big tourist draw. You get bars, you get restaurants, you get everything. There's an Irish restaurant, I can't remember the name of it, that I was at once, I think on the lower end of Church Street. Again, I can't remember the name, but, if you go there, it's a couple of blocks in length, so you'll be able to find it. Excellent food. And they're, what was it? I got some sort of stew there, and it had these big-ass chunks of red meat. It was really, really good. Like, it was the sort of thing that was probably sitting there stewing on a really low heat for like 10 hours. Really hearty. And it was winter, so that's important. Burlington also is the land of alcohol because I don't even know how many bars are there. Even Rutland, though, we're infamous for having more bars per capita than almost any other place in the United States. Actually, you can literally look it up on a map. It's pretty pretty advanced when it comes to our drunkenness and the weed, and then weed tourism. By the way, would be another thing in Vermont because it is decriminalized here and about to be probably legalized. There's gonna be more of it, so look forward to like dispensaries and getting your hubbly bubbly and your Northern Lights and everything else under the sun that you could possibly want as far as your reefer madness goes. And then you can get munchies if you're here in the Rutland area specifically. First Middlebury, going down the state. Middlebury, the biggest thing there is the Morgan Horse Farm, which I think is about 10 miles west of Middlebury proper. I've been there before, and it's sort of kind of museum-y, and they have the horses sort of on display, and it's quite nice. It's sort of a working farm, like horse farm situation. It's a type of horse that's from Vermont itself, so, relatively well known here. They sell Ben & Jerry's, which of course is important. Coming down to the Rutland area, the big draws that we have here, one would be the Marble Quarry, the actual museum. There is one there. And by the way, links in the description to some of these places. And another one would honestly be Wilson Castle, which I've been to as well. And it's quite nice. I think it's still, the uppermost floor I think is still being renovated. So I don't think that's accessible quite yet. And I think there's also a basement area that they use just as offices. But it's quite large. It's basically an oversized Victorian. It's not a castle as the average person would envision it with like parapets and walls and towers and stuff. It's just a huge Victorian. But it's got all sorts of period furniture and art and stuff inside as well. It's got all sorts of history. You could spend several hours looking through it, especially in the side room, the study, which is relatively small, but it's jam-packed with old like Victorian-era artifacts, which I found to be quite interesting. Going on down to Bennington, visiting, if you're a paranormal enthusiast, Lake Champlain's probably number one on your list. Number two is probably Glastonbury Mountain in that general region. I don't know if there are any like markers or anything like that set up. I do believe there is one little sort of historical society that collates material about the local history, which would have material on that. And then as a counterpart, probably the Bennington Battle Monument, which is the largest standing structure in Vermont. It's not like the Washington Monument, but it is a big-ass obelisk celebrating sort of the Battle of Bennington. Going over to the other side of the state there, because it's more rural in a lot of areas, there's less to do, but a lot of tourists like to go to Woodstock, which is where I grew up. It's literally a little village, but it's like the village locked in time. When I went there last, it hadn't changed from when I was there, like, 10, 15 years before. Literally exactly the same. And in fact, I think it was 15 years almost elapsed. Nothing, absolutely nothing had changed. Not a single coat of paint, not a single colored sign, not a single business, I think. Actually, it's literally exact. And it's been that way for so many decades, probably always going to be that way. It's very scenic. Definitely eat at the Mountain Creamery if you want the best food. And there's not a huge amount to see there, but you do have Billings Farm. And that alone makes it worth it. If you're getting lunch going to Billings Farm, and then they have the Woodstock Inn, which is notoriously, it's fairly upscale. It's quite a nice place to be in. Now you can sort of go in and sit in the lobby too and have a cup of coffee, and they don't really care. I didn't tell you that, but they don't really give a fuck. Going north from Woodstock, you have, well, northeast, more east than north. You would come to the, I believe, Norwich area, if I remember correctly, with the Montshire Museum. And the Montshire Museum is probably the most fun thing in Vermont. It's this huge, it's not just a museum. And they have periodic rotating displays, like they have the dinosaur exhibit or space or something. It's more than a museum, it's very hands-on and interactive, and that part tends to be geared maybe more towards the younger crowd, but I don't know, because I went there, I was already an adult at the time, a young adult. I still had a great time. They have this big-ass leaf cutter ant colony, like in this glass case, you can actually watch them bumbling around. They have a beehive in glass that you can actually look at. They have all sorts of weird, sort of a Rube Goldberg style machine with little metal marbles that you can crank around and it does weird things. They have something where you actually get on a bike and you pedal and you're trying to light up lamps by pedaling for a long and fast enough period of time to show how much caloric energy has been drained, basically. It's very interesting. And that's just the indoor exhibits and a small part. The biggest thing indoors is up in one of the towers. They get a fog machine, and it's really, really fun. The fog rolls down this big black, slanted table, and they're little sponges and stuff, and you use it to, make, little breaks in the fog. And it's really fun to, fog yourself with it. And then outside, they've got several things that were added, in recent years, I believe. There are hiking trails around the museum, scenic trails and sort of scientific things with oh, this plant is, blah, blah, blah. Here's a habitat for some bird, amphibians, little swampland. And I think there are 3 or 4 of those. And then in the enclosed area, there's this massive, massive, little artificial stream, and it's got these little things that they shoot out water, and then you can use, all these little, they have, little platforms you can move around to move the water, and you can sort of dam it up, or you can let it go free, and it's pretty fun. It's addictive. It's definitely a hands-on place to be. So those are a few of the things in the state that I find most interesting, and of course, if you come here specifically to Rutland, restaurant-wise, the Yellow Deli, #1 on my list. Seward's restaurant is also good. If you want sort of the fried food thing, go to Seward's. If you want sort of hippie-ish food, like the all-organic, the real fruit smoothies, and also you want to eat enormous quantities, you go to the Yellow Deli, I think. And then the Kong Chow Fusion, if you want, they have not just Chinese food, they also have some Vietnamese food. And it's quite good. It's definitely it's the only... I think Asian-style restaurant in the Rutland area that would be considered beyond, the Orient taste level. No disrespect to Orient taste, your dumplings are pretty good, but it's not quite the same kind of food. Kong Chow is a bit higher end, and they have some cocktails and, imported beers and stuff that look pretty good. Ain't had them, because I'm always the driver, so, I can't drink and drive. Yeah, that's another thing. Don't do that in this state. And make sure to buckle up. It's the law. They try to scare people about that, actually. So there's a little bit of the good side of Vermont. I know a lot of this series has been ranting about our shitty governor, shitty state policies, hey, businesses can't get ahead. But there are some fun things to do here. problem being, of course, they're mainly fun for out-of-staters. Well, you've exhausted them fairly quickly once you live in-state, and you go over and start cannibalizing like New Hampshire and Massachusetts historic sites. But no, and there are a lot of like historical markers and little places just scattered around the state, like by the thousands. Like little farmhouses. Is a round barn that's, I believe, now crumbling into the earth, you know, like 10 miles north from here. Used to be llamas there, I think. I think literally it got into the news. The dude had llamas, or a camel or something he was raising, and then he couldn't supply enough feed, and he's like, oh, I want to be bailed out so the animals don't die. And they're like, what do you expect us to do, dude? It's your responsibility. It's your private property. That was funny. Yeah, you hear weird news in this state. And that's sort of why I started the series, because I figured, well, it's going to be like basically the hayseed news. People find it funny. The problem is, of course, sometimes there's not even any weird news to report, and that's, you know, I keep taking so much time in the morning getting ideas for the Vermont issues. It's starting to drain too much of my time that I could be using editing, making like a third political video, more gaming perhaps, occultism, which I'd like to get back into making more often. Not just the literary side, but, you know, so I want to branch out into the more specifically paranormal side too, like some of the weird creatures and stuff. Just do, you know, little collections and stuff, like the Mongolian death worm. I'd love to talk about that. Things like that interest me. It has to do with the Fortean zoology sort of side of, well, what you could say is the quasi-occult. I want to talk about that. So yeah, this is the last episode, at least for now. I'll probably at least try to do like a weekly episode thing. It's just the playlist will probably be replaced by one for gaming. That's about all. Peace out.